Mike Keller has asked, what is the most reliable diesel engine?
These days, right now, out of the new engines, I'd have to say that the Detroit is winning the race for that. They seem to have the best luck and the least downtime. So I'd say right now Detroit is winning that race. And I'd say Packard is in second place and Cummins is in third. Now also, I've been reading about, I believe it's the Scania, not to leave the European guys out, that has come out with like a 777 horsepower motor. And I've never driven one of those. I'd love to try it, but apparently this engine is an amazing motor. So you've got to keep that in mind too with those guys over there.
Robert comments the difference between a Mack and a Volvo was nothing but the name on the hood and the engine block.
Well, certainly now I believe they're both owned by the same company. I don't think they're manufactured in the same plants. And Mack seems to be more of a construction application rather than a highway truck, whereas the Volvo is a highway truck, or built primarily to be a highway truck anyway, and it doesn't seem to do that particularly well. But it's kind of application. When you build a truck, it helps if you get the proper build to match the application. It makes a big difference. So maybe that's part of where Volvo falls down. Maybe they'd be better off, as a vocational truck rather than a highway truck.
Jose Lopez, the best one is the Detroit Series 60, 12.7, very reliable.
Yeah, that was an incredibly reliable engine. And that, if you were watching a few weeks ago when we had Marty on talking about the ice road trucking, that was what he had, was the 12.7 Detroit. Working in outrageous conditions, outrageous cold, pulling all sorts of heavy weight. That motor's still running today with a couple million miles on it. You can't argue with that.
And in the ice roads, he never shut it off.
Yeah, and it ran like non-stop. That's right. Exactly.
They want you always in a new truck, not for safety, but so you will do anything for work. That has been true of trucking companies for decades. I've seen that happening for many decades. That's the truth.
That is the truth. That's right. And that's part of the reason you don't see these carriers, although they're coming around. But it used to be if your truck was older than 5 years and you were an owner-operator, they didn't want you. Well, they're changing that now because they can't get anybody. But yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they didn't want you to have an escape plan. They wanted you to be needy.
Yeah, I worked for a carrier when my one truck was paid for, and they hated that because when I didn't like the load or whatever, I would just go home. And it drove them nuts that I could afford to go home. And that's, so there's something wrong with that. There's a lot wrong with that. Here's Robert. Daniel, the engines are built in the same plant and the bodies are painted in the same plants. Volvo and Mack, I'm assuming he's talking about. That's interesting. Jay Holzer says Volvo engines are garbage. I guess it's like anything else. I've known a couple guys with Volvo engines that ran for years really well, but part of my beef with them is when you go to trade them, they're worth nothing.
Dylan has a comment. I have $25,000 to put down on a truck, but the company says only $5,000 down to keep the payments and write off for your taxes. Your thoughts?
Give me your thoughts, Kathy, because right away I'd say put the 25 down.
It depends. If you've got more than 25, do you have backup money in case you need it for repair?
Yeah,
so it depends on your situation.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. You don't want to pay out the 25 grand and have nothing left in the bank. So if something goes wrong, and something does half the time. So good point, Kathy.
Someone has commented, I was behind a dude that had a C304 105 gross weight. I was at 95,000 pounds pulling. He was pulling hay. He started pulling me at the top of the 6% grade, both 18 speed. I believe he has less horsepower than me. Like, how is this?
Well, it could be all in his gearing too. If he didn't have the same gearing as you, if he's geared really tall, he won't pull as well. So my guess is that's where the issue is, and he just had the wrong gearing for where he was at the time. I don't know if I've ever told the story about my two friends heading up Parley's one day, and the one guy had a hopped up uh, 92 V8 92 Detroit, a hopped up one, and my other buddy had a 3406B stock, both pretty much geared the same, and the guy with the silver 92 was bragging about how good his truck was and it would outpull anything, and then the other guy with the 3406 pulls out in the left-hand lane and just walks by him like he's standing still, and the guy with the Detroit, which was Mike Davison at the time, was so annoyed that he went home and pulled out the Detroit and put in a 3406 Cat. He was so mad.
If nothing else, the modern trucks have taken the romance out of trucking.
I'd have to agree with that. I'd have to agree with that. It's part of why there wasn't a driver shortage was because the trucks were so nice. Everybody and his uncle wanted to drive one. And now, like, look at these Tesla trucks they've come out with. Look at that truck and tell me if you'd want to get into that every day. And man, they've lost that driver appeal and the romance, because you're so, there's so much babysitting now in the trucking industry too. So that just takes away from it as well. So yeah, it has lost the romance. You used to be able to set your own schedule. Now they set the schedule for you, and that's a mistake.
Chrome Diesel mentions, would oil interval at 30,000 to 60,000 miles would hurt a modern engine's longevity?
Apparently not if you're using synthetic oil, and Mack, as a matter of fact, recommends that for their new engines. Synthetic engine oil and changing it like 50,000 miles, which, makes me kind of squirm being an old school guy. And I think I'd spend the money and swap it out earlier than that anyway. Because that was just, that's just how we think, old school guys. We want fresh fluid in there all the time. But I'm hearing more and more of that. I'm not trying it in my truck, but yet I've got synthetic oil in the tranny and the rears, and it's been just fine, no trouble with it at all. Maybe it's all right, the engines. I'd just be afraid to try it on mine. That's a good question, and I guess it depends on your business plan, how long you plan to keep the truck, and how much you're prepared to spend. The Kenworth will cost you more out of the gate. It'll get better resale value. Freightliner actually now is making a fairly decent truck, a fairly reliable truck. Yes, there's the problem with the Freightliner is that there's thousands of them on the used truck market, so your resale is down for that. But if you've got a good Freightliner dealer, like right close to where you live, and you're planning on trading every couple of years, it might not be a bad way to go. It would depend on your business plan. The other problem with long extended oil changes is that every time you do an oil change, you should check the pan and check the plug and everything like that. And you should be looking for metal shavings or little pieces of motor that shouldn't be in there. But if you're only looking at that every 75,000 miles, by the time you catch a problem, it could have developed into something really serious. And I used to change my oil religiously at 12,000 miles, and I used to look at the oil and look for anything that shouldn't be in there. And, you do that once a month, I think that's a good practice.
What do you think of the shops that take the emissions equipment off trucks? What's your opinion on that?
That's a really tough question, because you've heard me saying it. Reliability is everything when you own a truck. And the shops that are taking the emission systems off are doing that at the owner's request because he needs better fuel mileage and better reliability than what he's getting. So, and I'm not going to fault the shop for doing what the customer asks. I know the government has a problem with that. However, up where I live, the big factories are still pumping smoke out the stacks all over the place. And So I'm not feeling too sympathetic for the EPA when they're only solving problems here and there as they pick and choose them. Trucks have to be reliable. They implemented these emissions requirements before they had the technology to master them. And that was just a stupid thing to do, but typical government. And no, I have no problem with the shops taking it off. You know, they're running a legal risk now because the government's clued into that. But no, I got no problem with the shops doing it.
Jess Sager has a comment. Well, all the issues with automated manuals are also compounded with having to replace the clutch every 250,000 miles. The one I run at work was throwing metal pieces, causing gear hopping and slipping.
Yeah, and those things are expensive to work on too. And again, back to the cost as an owner operator, for instance. I guess if the carrier buys them, that's one thing. But a guy that can't afford to have truck trouble with an automatic, you're just asking for it.
Igor Malman, Dave, if you're buying a glider truck today, what engine would you put in it?
That's a really good question. And if I was buying a glider, I'd put a rebuilt Cat in it, or a Detroit. I'd go for the Cat, but you know, either one you'd be fine with. Like Fitzgerald at the end there, I don't know what they're doing now, but they were putting older 12.7 Detroits in most of those, and that was fine. They were having good luck with that. But I'm a Cat guy. I'd have a rebuilt Cat, like a 1999 or older, put in a glider kit. That'd be my first choice if I was buying a new truck.
The government is still running 8 V92s with no emissions and tank transporters all the time, and all their road trucks deleted the DD15s and the 12.7s. They don't even follow their own rules.
Yeah, the hypocrisy of the whole thing is just incredibly stupid anymore. And it's, they don't follow their own rules, but they want everybody else to stick to them. That just sends me. It's a world with rules anymore, not a lot of common sense. You've got to get something that works. I know they're not big on that, but oh well. What's my favorite song to listen to while driving? I got a bunch of favorites. Okay. All right. That's not my favorite song. I don't even have
Deandra Cook, what do you think of the C18 Cat?
Oh, awesome motor. Awesome engines. Yep, I'd love to have one of those motors. I'll be interested to see what Cat does now, whether they'll come back into the truck market or not. There's talk of it.
Elite truckers, which motor would you choose if you had to choose between a Cummins X15 and the Detroit DD15?
I'd take the DD15 in a heartbeat, just because they're more of them are reliable. The Cummins, like SoCal Sandman's got a good one, but it's a hell of a crapshoot. I'd pick the Detroit just because they have a better track record.
The Dodge Man 50, the EPA could really force us to 53-foot trailers with a bicycle.
Yeah, it's they can mandate that the things run on water if they want, but that's not to say that the engineers can't make it work successfully. It's just the whole thing is just stupid. It's interesting to note now out in California, a lot of guys have found the DEF fluid is just too expensive, so they're filling up their DEF tanks with water. That's enough to make sure that the system reactivates and the motor doesn't derate, and they've had no trouble running their trucks with water in the DEF tanks.
Ross M., is it possible to pass a safety inspection, register a truck with deleted DEF, DPF, EGR in Ontario?
No, Ontario has clued into that now, and unless you have a buddy with his own shop, and some guys do, I do, but no, the general, if you roll into a dealership and try to get a safety, if it's got a deleted system, they won't safety it anymore because they don't want the liability.
SoCal Sandman turns you around here and said his is an ISX, not an X15.
Ah, okay, yeah, my mistake. Sorry, My mistake. Well, being a Cummins guy, obviously you prefer the one you've got. I guess I answered my own question there.
J. Holzer, 1989. I think we can all agree that the International Max Force is at the absolute worst engine ever produced.
They are very popular up here because they're good for mooring your boat. You just run a chain through the ring on the block, drop it into the lake, run a float up to the top of the water, and they're a great boat anchor. Other than that, they're not much good for anything.
Ray Lars, can you explain the benefits of a marine engine? Why would someone choose a marine engine? Power, right?
Power
and speed.
And then there's power, and then there's the other issue of more power, because marine engines are designed by nature to push huge, heavy, bulking boats with a lot of drag through the water. It's a different application than a truck. A truck has rolling resistance. A boat has just like nonstop drag on the hull. So those marine engines can pull trees. Like, they're awesome for torque. Yeah, pull trees out of the ground. But yeah, that one that the Lettuce King had, you had to see it work. It was incredible. I've known a few guys with the marine engines, all of them, just amazing. But there's something else too. Everybody I know with the marine engine, they put out awesome power, but they smoked, like a lot of smoke if you stood on it. So these engines are ones they put in yachts, but you don't see yachts smoking, but it's because the exhaust goes into the water. So why aren't the EPA chasing the yacht owners? Like, pull your Chris Craft over and let's do an emissions test. You don't see that. Double standard.
Elite truckers with a DD15 505 horse, which gear ratio would be the best between the balance of pulling power and fuel economy?
I would, a good all-around working combination is like an 18-speed with 370s. It would depend on what kind of weight you're pulling, but if you had like 370 gears, you kind of got the best of everything there. So an 18-speed and 370s, I would pick, and like tall rubber.
A grilled mortal. A marine engine might be handy running under the ice on the ice roads.
What's wrong with that guy? One of the problems with the 3408s was, and the marine engines were mostly V8 motors, a lot of V8 motors, was they were heavy. So when you went to scale the load, a guy with a marine engine was at a disadvantage. That's not true. A guy with a V8 motor was at a weight disadvantage over a guy with a 6-cylinder motor. But yeah.
Andre Bernier, you said you can replace DEF with water?
Yes, that's what guys are doing out in California, and I don't know where else they're trying it. But a lot of guys in California are running water in their DEF tanks just because of the price of it, and none of their engines are having any trouble. It's fascinating, and of course the EPA, now that who's CARB in California, they have no comment.
Diego Castro, where do you buy a marine engine?
You have to have them either built or buy them from a dealership. Like if you go to a CAD or a Cummins dealership, not like the truck dealership, but go directly to CAD or to Cummins, or even to Detroit. You can buy one right out of the factory. You don't want to tell them you're putting it in a truck, but you can. They don't care. They just assume it's for construction or for your yacht or whatever, but you can buy them direct from the manufacturers, or a lot of aftermarket engine shops too.